Hey there, everybody. It's Nikki Jordan here with Got Space, and I wanted to talk about the resistance that we have to doing things that we know we need to do. Okay, so could you just receive what you have to do and not have that feeling in the body that's kind of a gripping, icky feeling, or a rolling your eyes, or an overwhelming sense of boredom, or a total lack of focus, right? You know how that happens is that you suddenly are trying to do a task and you get a sudden lack of focus, right? You really don't want to be doing it at all. So, um, this happened to me yesterday too, but I'll put it in context first about how I was talking to somebody who told me, oh my God, did you know how much homework I have over break? I'm like, wait, I thought you didn't have any homework on break. Oh no, because we don't have finals. We have all these projects to do. And I'm like, oh no, because that makes it really hard sometimes when you want to be doing something else to even take the moment to receive what you have to do. So I had that last night too. I was helping someone with a resume, right? And they really hadn't done a resume. They'd seen some examples, but they haven't had to do one in so long. So I looked at the examples of what they were, or I guess they made their resume into an example of what someone else had done successfully, and then they showed me the job description. Well, this is a fairly high level job, and so the description was pages long. What happens when you get like when you're like me and you're like, oh, I'm doing this and I don't really feel like doing this, right? Is that I suddenly have this. I have to stop and receive. Hey there, Rachel, Maruna. I have to receive what is sitting in front of me. So for me to sit way late at night after having a really crappy, if you haven't seen my post, a really crappy day, it started off was supposed to be wonderful. And within just a half an hour, it became crap. And it's just stayed that way all day. I'm like, oh, great. Well, we're just going to roll through this day. So by the time I got to the night and someone had asked me to help them with this, my mind wasn't very focused on it. It was focused on sort of like trying to relieve myself of the day and just enjoy what was left. So everything is an entity. So let's say there's a job. There's a job that wants you, or let's say there's your homework project that wants you, right? It's like you have to do this thing and you're resisting it. And so what we do is we stare at it and we grip. We can't receive it at all. To receive something is allow it to flow through. We grip, we create a barrier, we define it as boring, or whatever else emotions that we're feeling simply because we don't want to do it. Now we know that we're creating a problem for ourselves, but we don't really get out of it, right? We stay there, we wallow in it a bit. But as I looked at this like 4-page long job description and all that I had to read, I'm like, how am I going to look at this very complex job and then look at this person's, very long resume and say, how would I help them? Can I even focus? And what I did was I asked what I was reading, or, what you have to focus on, your homework or your project or whatever it is. I asked it to come through. And the most interesting thing happened when I did this, when I asked it to come through, because I could feel my mind wandering, right? And every time I felt my mind wandering, I asked it to come through. I felt this wave coming through the back of my head and focusing me on what I was reading. I'm like, wow, this is really interesting. I'm like, wow, I could have used this a long time ago when I was studying for all those years. I have several master's degrees, right? Or anything that I read, right? That wasn't just a gripping story. So every time I looked at one piece and I'm like, wow, there's a lot in that paragraph. I asked it to just flow through and I saw a few words. I mean, I read it, but I didn't have to read the whole thing. And then I went to the next and the next thing, but it kept me focused because I asked it to be with me. I was looking at the job description, right? And it's something I know nothing about, right? So then I'm like, okay, I sort of know a little bit about it, but not a lot at all. And this is a complex job. And so I kept asking it to focus me because my mind would wander and start to think about this problem that I had earlier today and that problem I had and this thing I had to do. Like it didn't want to stay. And then as soon as I asked the job or the thing that I was reading to come through, it it really flowed through me, and it took my attention from everywhere it was and put it right there. And it was an amazing gift, because then I was able to make that thing fun because it wasn't difficult. The difficult we have is sometimes we think, how am I going to get through all of this? You know, think of the amounts of projects that kids have, or if this is a kid watching this, you kids have, right? The amounts of projects that you have to do in a time when you want to have fun. Okay, so we're not really supposed to be having fun, because we're, at least where we live, it's COVID and they're asking you to stay at home. But if you're not doing that, or you're just distracted by the TV or whatever, you know, how do you get yourself there? Now, you know that when you finish something, you'll feel better about yourself, right? You could focus on the outcome, but if you actually just ask the energy of what you are working on to come through, you might accomplish it much faster than you thought. I did. I read all that stuff way faster than I normally would have, right? You might accomplish it faster than what you thought. You might have fun doing it. You might discover that, wow, I can use this tool and this will really help me, right? This could help me in so many ways, because we do this all the time. Like if someone distracts you, just earlier, I was doing a task that I didn't really want to do. Someone distracted me for something very interesting. I got into it, except I felt disturbed. And then I sat there and said, what was I doing again? You know, as then I'm like, I asked that thing to flow through to remind me where I was. How many of you get disturbed a lot? You know, like interfered with a lot? I do all the time, you know, and it will be very random things too. It might be a text that someone sent. So anyway, it's really important to allow for the flow, because this is the opposite of our resistance or reaction. Now, we're so used to holding on to our emotions or having our reactions to things that we almost think they're great friends. But in fact, what's really the best friend that you can have, because it will make you feel lighter and more free, is the flow and the space that comes from whatever at the moment. In fact, yesterday, something really terrible happened to a friend of mine, and I was sitting right there when it happened. And all I could do, and this has happened to me in real emergencies before, was become the widest amount of space as I could, so that whatever they were gripping onto, I didn't contribute to that. Do you ever notice how, like, say there's a problem, right? And someone talks about it and they're gripping on their emotion, then you start to do that too. It's not even your problem. And you start to do it too. You grip and you feel it and you start to commiserate with them, or you're the person who always wants to play the devil's advocate, you know, or something like that. And you find yourself like resisting and combating that. So these are all examples of how if we stopped and just let everything flow through, it would be much easier, and you will find the truth. So I'm going to post later about working with difficulty. Right? When really difficult things happen, what space can you go into? But this was just a really simple example of, I don't feel like doing this. Okay, so I could use that with wrapping Christmas presents, you know, like rather than just relaxing into it, you're actually asking the flow and the joy of the presents and the giving or whatever it was, unless you know, overbought and didn't love this and it's a chore for you and you hate it. But what if it actually wasn't like that? So my task where I could have used this, but I hadn't thought about this yet, that when I used it came later, was while I was wrapping with somebody who doesn't know how to wrap, for example, then you have to show them how to wrap. And I'm like, God, this is becoming such a chore. But what if I'm like, let's ask all the energy of the space of the gifts that we're giving, or the fun of the holidays, like, because a lot of people say this isn't fun. How much do we not receive the fun because we have the resistance and reaction, right? Instead of letting just everything flow, because when you let things flow, you have to be all space. You have to be wide. You have to exist not in a contained box, right? When you exist not in a contained box, then the flow can come through and the joy can come through, and all the energy of the entities of, like, I don't know if you saw how many presents there were. Wow, that was a lot of wrapping. Kind of resisted that, but the paper was pretty, Someone gave me the paper. It was really pretty. So anyway, this was really about tasks and homework and how I got through something I didn't think I was going to get through and I thought it was really boring. But what if you could use this? Especially you kids who now have to do projects, final projects over winter break. That might help you. Okay, have a nice day.